In the quest to build 3D delts, we very often think of a couple exercises. We think about hitting our front shoulders with some sort of military press, and we think about growing those side delts with some sort of lateral raise. But the missing thing in that equation is something that's going to really grow our rear delts, and if we don't spend some time doing that, we're not going to have the 3D shoulders that we really want. We're not going to really have that superhero shoulder look, and that's why a lot of people turn to the rear delt raise. Now, before we get into the rear delt raise, we have to understand a little bit about how the rear delts work, because they work a little bit differently than the rest of our shoulders. Instead of helping us elevate and instead of helping us drive the shoulder forward, our rear delts essentially move our upper arm behind our torso. Except here's the thing. As we're moving our upper arm behind our torso, there are a lot of other muscle groups that get involved there. Our lats, our mid-back muscles, and those are larger muscle groups. Therefore, sometimes it can be hard to isolate the rear delts, and that's why we go to the rear delt raise. Because this move, when we do the rear delt raise and we get our arms out to our sides, we take our lats a little bit out of play, and it helps us focus in on the rear delts a little bit more, develop that mind-muscle connection, and really build the small muscle. You're still gonna get some other muscles when you do the rear delt raise. You're gonna get a little bit of core in there. Your rhomboids, which are the muscles between your shoulder blades, are gonna wind up firing. Your rotator cuff muscles are gonna be very, very involved, especially if you're doing it smart. They're gonna help keep your shoulders safe, and we're gonna get a lot of rear delts. This is an exercise that really is worthwhile for a lot of populations, especially if you're somebody who bench presses. If we've been in the gym very often and we're getting a lot of anterior work, that's gonna pull us forward. The rear delt raise is one of those exercises that can help pull us back, let our chest show. And in general, if you're somebody who sits at a desk and works a lot, I'd rather see you do the rear delt raise than do a whole ton of push-ups. The push-ups are gonna push you forward. The rear delt raise is gonna help even out your physique, and it's gonna help protect your shoulder. The rear delt raise winds up being a great exercise for just about everybody, as long as you do it right. And that doesn't necessarily mean doing it the way you see everybody do it at the gym. We're gonna show you a more effective way to do the rear delt raise so you get more out of the exercise now. So the classic way to do the rear delt raise is going to involve a pair of dumbbells. The way you see most bodybuilders do it, we're going to get into that hinged forward position, butt's nice and back. Your shoulders are a little bit higher than your hips, and from there, we're essentially doing a reverse fly motion out. We're gonna squeeze our shoulder blades. Sometimes you're getting a little bit of a pause at the top of every rep. Sometimes as you go heavier, you wind up losing that pause and you get a little bit more of a rocking motion. It's a simple way to hit your rear delts, but it's not necessarily the best way to get the job done, and there's a reason for that. We have our lower back in there, and that winds up creating a really, really easy mechanism for us to cheat. It gets really, really easy to kind of rock with our torso as we're doing the rear delt raise, and we wind up not isolating our rear delts the reason we really want. Remember, the reason we're getting our arms away from our torso in the first place is so that we can isolate our rear delts as much as possible and take out the other muscles that can aid us in pulling our upper arms behind our torso. That's why I like to move this exercise over to the incline bench. We're gonna get a couple instant advantages once we get onto the incline bench. First of all, our core is not gonna have to be as involved. We're gonna be in a much more relaxed position because of that. And because our core is not involved, we're gonna be able to really focus on what we're doing with the exercise, on really squeezing our rear delts and squeezing our shoulder blades. And that's why we're really here in the first place. The other advantage of doing this on the bench is we have a little bit of scalability. The higher the incline on the bench, the easier this exercise becomes. The lower we make the bench, the harder the exercise becomes, because then we're starting to get closer to facing the full force of gravity. So our setup for this on the incline bench, I'm gonna use something similar to the angle that we would find if we were just doing the hinge version of this exercise. So it's gonna be about similar difficulty. But all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get my chest up high on the bench. I'm gonna think about driving my abs into the bench. Our core is not necessarily involved in this exercise, but we still wanna create a good stable position. So I'm thinking nice tight core, squeezing my glutes, and then all I'm gonna do from there is pick up my dumbbells. Now, there are two ways to do this exercise. There's a more complex way, if you will, where we're gonna keep our shoulder blades nice and relaxed. So we're gonna use this as a starting position. That's advanced, and that's gonna be a little bit more shoulder risk in the joint. The safer way to do it is to squeeze your shoulder blades, keep them up a little bit and use this as your starting position. We've got a lot more mid-back tension and our mid-back is a little bit more involved, but we're still gonna work our rear delts once we go into the motion. We're just gonna have a little bit more assistance from that mid-back. Either way, I'm gonna go with the safer version here. I'm gonna have a slight bend in my elbows. I'm gripping those dumbbells, and then all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna think about raising out, hold for a split second, and then drive down. And as I'm raising out, I'm almost thinking about lifting my palms forward, showing them to whatever's in front of me, and holding for that split second. And when I get that nice pause on top, I'm gonna start to feel my rear delts fire up. I'm gonna feel all my shoulders fire up. And I'm gonna feel this a little bit in my shoulder blades as well. I like to get that pause on top. When we get heavier, you're not gonna be able to pause, but that's why it's better to work this exercise with light weights, especially when you're learning it. That way you can get that good pause on top. That pause is excellent on all pulling exercises to help us really learn and start to understand mind-muscle connection. The one thing we want to avoid doing when we're doing this rear delt fly, but it becomes really convenient because we're on the bench, it can become really convenient, especially as we go heavier in weight, to drive into that raised position and also start to raise our chest, start to get our back involved in this, start to get our spine involved in this. That's not what we want to do. So think about really gluing your chest to the bench. Use this bench as a method of staying accountable to the motion and not involving your spine. And just never let your spine drive up off the bench. And just doing that exercise, even with light weight, I'm still starting to feel my rear delts already fire up. I get a good shoulder blade squeeze because we own that pause. So you want to think about a 1 to 2 second pause at the top of every single rep. That is the most effective way to both learn the rear delt raise and progress the rear delt raise, and it's going to help you develop the rear delts that you really want. In terms of sets and reps, you want to think about doing this for 3 to 4 sets of anywhere from 10 to 12 reps. We want to keep the reps high because we are working with the lighter weight, and this is an isolation move. Despite that, we can use it in our workouts in a pretty large variety of ways. You can do this on a back day, throwing it in at the end of a back session because we are getting a lot of mid-back in here, so don't be afraid to put it on back day. You can also put this on a shoulder day or a push day. In this instance, it's actually not bad to do this as an early exercise in your workout. It's almost gonna cue you into a nice open chest position, and it's gonna get our shoulders in a good position for other exercises. Don't be afraid to do this anywhere from 3 to 4 times a week because it is a smaller muscle group, it's a postural muscle group, and it's something that's gonna offset a lot of what happens in life because we're always in the sitting position, and a lot of what happens in terms of what we really wanna do in the gym because it's really convenient to wanna bench press and to hit all those glamour exercises first. But if you really want that glamour look and we want that superhero look, then we've got to get the rear delt raise into our workouts because this is going to help complete your physique and clean up your posture. And those are 2 things that everybody could use. So get the rear delt raise in your workouts, do it on the incline bench. You'll thank me later when you have superhero shoulders.